So a bit of a new double act here. My name is Daniel Paul, I'm part of LivEco, and this is Alan Gillard, who is the architect on the scheme. It's quite new for me. Most of my background has been in high-end residential, which is mostly about the internal fit-out. I bought a farm on the outskirts of Cardiff about 5 years ago, and that's when I met Alan Gillard, and my green adventure began. So this is Alan.
Yeah, you saw the piece of cheese there, actually, a bit prematurely, but pieces of cheese were a sort of a trendy management training device, I think, in the 80s and 90s, and it was the cheese, if you like, on the outside of the cheese is the threat to the company or to the organisation, and the other side of the cheese is the organisation, and the idea is that the cheese has holes in it, but the holes don't go through from one side to the other. You've probably all heard of this, particularly if you work in the government, probably. The idea, though, is that there's built-in resilience to the organisation because the holes don't go all the way through. The reason I've chosen this, or we've chosen this to illustrate our talk, is that we feel as though also the cheese demonstrates the difficulties involved. You know, if we have a design and we're looking for a solution, the solution is on the other side, and we have to try and work our way through the piece of cheese, and we start off in a hole which doesn't quite go through, and we try another hole. And Jane Davidson was talking about the difficulties involved in getting a development actually off the ground, and Dan will come back and talk to you about a few of those lessons that we learned later on, but the cheese itself represents a whole load of difficulties, and rather than try and reinvent the wheel, I think in our practice, we decided that actually, why not go abroad and find out how they do things? Because as we've already heard, they're a long way ahead of us. And particularly Swiss cheese is a great idea, because Switzerland is one of the world leaders in terms of building energy-efficient housing in communities. And I've just put a little thing in the top right-hand corner there of the screen. If that logo comes up in the top right-hand corner, that implies that there is an important person as part of this little presentation. So, sustainability. Oh, hang on. Wow. Sustainability. We know that we can make sustainable housing in terms of its energy efficiency. I think most architects in this room would agree that we're sort of on top of that sort of thing. But how do we get there, and who's been there first? And I'm introducing the first of the important people. His name is Rudy Creasy, and he is an incredible man, actually. In 1990, he designed and built some of the very first zero-carbon houses in the world. This is a model that we're really interested in to study, to see how he achieved it. There was a lot of excitement, as he'll tell you. The whole world came to see these zero-carbon buildings. But when the fuss died down, he felt that he'd only really tackled zero carbon for the people that lived in those particular houses. Were the lessons actually being extended beyond the owners or occupiers of those houses? How could he affect more widely sustainability and energy efficiency generally? So he actually went away and came up with the concept of Minergy. Minergy is a benchmark in the same way that LEED is a benchmark, but Minergy was there first. So for a guy to start off by designing and building houses, and then he decided to go and invent a benchmark, he then started coming up with the idea of what is a Minergy house. And it's very simple, actually. We know the recipe. It's to do with simple envelopes, it's to do with air tightness and energy efficiency, and the way you deliver that energy into the property, not making it complicated, using thermal mass. All these things have all been done before, and they were done a long time ago by Rudy Creasy. But I think the interesting thing for Rudy was that he felt that the message wasn't getting through. The message being that energy efficiency is one thing. If you try and make people change their lives because of energy efficiency, it doesn't quite work. You have to deliver some other concept, and that could be to do with value, as we've seen already, value to the property. But if the market isn't developed enough, people don't perceive that increase in value. And I think that was coming through with some of the earlier slides. Creasy actually thought about the idea of comfort, and that is really how the Minergy concept took off in Switzerland and is now spreading to other Central European countries. The idea that the concepts that we use in low energy housing can increase enormously the quality of life for people. And so it's not just about energy efficiency or saving money or having an energy efficient house, it's to do with an increased quality of life. And in our own practice, we actually realised that people were wanting to increase their own quality of life, and we had a string of reasonably well-off people that wanted to do their own thing. They wanted to have their own low energy house, they wanted to be sustainable, and this is an example of one of the first zero energy houses in Glamorgan. The people that asked us to design this were really just after a lovely quality of life and no fuel bills forever, which is what they've got. This is a scheme that we did for Atlantic College actually, which reduced their fuel bills by 95%. This is another very energy efficient house for a very wealthy client. But I think it actually goes back to this model. How are we achieving a viability? Because all of these projects cost a lot of money. And how was it equitable? How could we deliver this recipe to a wider number of people? And I think this is where the LivEco concept was born. Could we apply the lessons that we'd already learned in terms of supplying and delivering houses, one-off houses to wealthy people? Could we actually generate a recipe that would deliver it to more, shall we say, ordinary people with not huge pockets? I put that slide in because it's also an important person, obviously, but that person influenced policy in another way. And it's interesting to see really that the building regulations and so on are responding possibly not quite as radically as they could have been, because there's this perceived notion that high sustainability, good energy efficiency is too expensive and it's not viable. You can't build it for a price that people will buy it for. But of course we know all about the fact that Welsh properties are probably one of the most energy inefficient in the country, and I think that's amazing considering the fairly benign climate we have. If it costs more to run a house in Cardiff than it does in Sheffield, that's saying something about the quality of housing in Cardiff. So going back to the cheese model, you know, could we get these holes to line up? Could we work on a recipe, put enough effort into it to actually make sure that we could get these ideas to fly? And so we started with the Minergy standard. We took then the Code 4 idea of trying to deliver a higher than minimum code level, and that involves all sorts of things to do with choices in terms of the code, but also about the idea that fabric first is an easy way, if you like, of delivering the code, but it's not easy to achieve in terms of the building fabric and the technologies that go into it. Of course, code is built up of other concepts like lifetime homes and secure by design. So if we're not just looking at energy, we're looking at quality of life, these other factors start to come in. And I was going to introduce Daniel as saying that he's a man who has a vision. I think he also has an ambition. But he's also got his eye on the main thing, which is, can we make money out of this? Is there a win-win situation? Can we deliver these houses and make money out of it? And can they be affordable? This led through to the Great House Farm project, which I've got a few pictures of here. But the basic concepts of Great House Farm, they really are trying to set as a standard really what we think is LivEco, which is a minimum of Code 4 without using renewables. Achieving that for terraced houses is actually pretty tricky, so I'm pleased to see there's some progress there in SAP for the next round of building regulations. But it's also the idea of trying to build communities as well, places where people enjoy living, and trying to build in some sort of common theme into a development which will help people to have a better life and build a community. So this is the physical reality of a Great House Farm. A lot of renewable materials, green roofs for surface water runoff, and so on. So, but there's nothing really new or groundbreaking in any of these. I think what we're trying to say is that we've got a more of a holistic approach to the whole thing. We're trying to tackle all of the issues that we've been talking about today in a way which can deliver great places to live. And I think at that stage I'll hand over to Dan, because at the sharp end, he's the guy who has to put the money where his mouth is. What are the difficulties that we've had to face, and what's the true developer's perspective?
Yeah, all we've done here really is buy a piece of land, get planning permission, build and sell something. So we're not trying to do anything too special, but we thought we'd speak about the problems we had along the way. In the current climate, and especially in Wales, speculative housing development is very tough. To find sites, get a planning permission, get funding is very tough, and I think the Help to Buy will help this, although it's probably 6 months, I think, too late. First, looking at planning permissions, and this ties a lot with what the lady there said before. At Great House Farm, it took us over 18 months to get planning permission, and we're within the settlement boundary. So it's not greenfield, this is within the settlement boundary. We had a few issues. There's a listed building there, conservation area, ecology, but there's a bit of a lack of joined-up thinking from the councils, and I think they seem to be ingrained, I think, the developers trying to pull a fast one or get one over on them. And I don't think they can see a well-thought-out, sustainable scheme at all. So I think there needs to be a bit of a culture change in planning departments, where planners actually welcome good quality, well-thought-out, sustainable schemes. I think planners, local councils, and local councillors need to welcome that and not throw sort of obstacles in your way. We had lots of issues here with the planning officer not agreeing with the tree officer, not agreeing with the SBD guy, and it just went on and on. And when we first started, Alan had no grey hair, and now he's got a little bit of grey hair, and I think by the end of it, he'll probably lose that. I mean, now after all, house building, yeah, exactly. Now house building has a multiplier effect, and obviously I'd said that as a developer, but we've done everything as much as we can within the local economy, so labour, materials, bathrooms, kitchens, everything has been done. So, you know, it should be a good news story, but the way it's presented, and especially in planning committees, it's a bad news story. Even though, as I said, this was within the settlement boundary, we went to planning committee 3 times, and it wasn't mentioned once that it was a code 4. It wasn't mentioned once it was a green, sustainable scheme, not once. And that's in Cardiff. So if that's the capital city, you can imagine what's happening in other cities. Secondly, finance. There's far fewer banks and financial institutions looking to lend on property. I think even the Sunday Telegraph said yesterday that it's almost impossible. If you throw into that mix sustainable design, or these are built with SIP panels, it becomes a no-no, because it's the big C word, there's no comparables. And if there's no comparables, banks won't lend. And it's become very, very expensive. The old players in the finance market have now disappeared, and banking finance has become very, very tough. So these 2 points, I think, put a brake on small developments. So small developers find it very hard to buy, get planning permission, and get financing. I think we need small developers if you want to change the housing mix and change the supply that's on offer. Also, sustainable building does cost money. Seems odd to have to state this, but I guess if it didn't cost more, the national house builders will be doing it more often and to a higher level. Professional fees increase, there's more professional input needed, and the design team have to do more work as you get on the wheel to get the code and to get the levels right. Also, I think there is a higher cost for building materials and specialised labour, and especially what we saw was site monitoring, which comes onto the performance gap between what the architect or the QS or the engineer says and what happens on site when you've got 17 or 20-year-old people building, and invariably in South Wales it's pouring with rain. So that performance gap is something which is something that needs to be looked at. So what have we got? We've got a long planning period, higher financial cost, higher professional cost, higher build cost. So how do you make a margin? You put up the end house price. So what you were talking about there. Trouble is you can't. You can't, not yet. That's where we are on the curve at the moment. People won't pay more for code 4 or code 5. I think we need to get there, and it's going to be about education, but people won't pay the extra. It's very hard, if you talk about future savings of money, to then bring that back to the present value. And I think people haven't yet got onto that. Whether bills have to go up more, I don't know. But at the moment, they won't pay more. That brings me on to the other point, is that the other way I think we can promote sustainable design is to push the demand side. So if we do educate the buyers or the end users, the home buyers, what they can expect, maybe they'll ask national house builders or suppliers of building stock to do better. I think people can expect to have lower fuel bills and can expect to live in a place where they feel comfortable and feel better as a person. So I think we need a lot more smaller sites that are accessible to small developers, and that will broaden the housing range that people can have. It's interesting, yesterday in the newspaper, Nick Clegg was saying that the average home buyer is now 35 years old. Home ownership is falling for the first time in a generation. And what do they want to do? They want to build 2 more garden cities. Well, it took us 18 months to 2 years to build this. So how long is it going to take to build a garden city? 5 years, 10 years, maybe more. We did finish this. We are selling them now. We've got a few left if anyone's interested. I've left some brochures outside. We're now working on the next phase. We've got 23 houses, which again, Alan is designing to Code 4 minimum. So we hope it'll be Code 4, Code 5. And that should be quite exciting, I think, in the next 12 months or so. So my model for Wales would be for people to support smaller firms. I think there's a lot of good design and good work going on in smaller firms, but you have to help these people get planning and have access to finance. And I think we have to teach people that they can expect a better home than what's on offer at the moment.
Okay, I'm just finishing off then. This dwelling here is actually probably one of the most interesting on the site and generated most interest from potential purchasers, and I think most of them said, well, aren't there more of those? Well, in fact, going back to the Swiss cheese analogy, this gentleman was one of the purchasers, and he purchased that unit that you've just seen. But interestingly, he's from Switzerland, and I think it's amazing that somebody from Switzerland can come to one of our sites and see something he recognised, because he didn't need any persuading about energy efficiency. He saw it, he got it, and then he bought it. And one of your quickest sales, I think. So, as Daniel mentioned, I think a lot of people were probably quite interested in the idea of more of those single-storey units, but these are some preliminary illustrations of the continuation of the Great House Farm project. And we're just putting together some brief pictures and photo montages to take to the planners for the next phase of the planning round, which hopefully we won't be starting from base this time. I think the first time we went to see the planner on the first scheme, I think the words dead body and over my were mentioned. I think on this round, I think we're starting from a higher level, and hopefully we'll be able to get this thing extended and put through in a much softer ride, let's say. And then to finish the presentation, obviously there's one more very important person that came along and helped us with some presentation, and of course that's the most important person in my opinion. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.